Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
First hour today, we're going to spend our time talking about Israel. Second hour, we'll be talking about the Middle East in general, so certainly that will be our focus today. Many of us have wondered what is exactly happening in Israel, so we decided to make a long-distance phone call to our good friend Avi Lipkin, and we are going to be talking with him. And as we talk across the ocean here, I think you will benefit from his on-the-spot reporting of what is happening in Israel right now. And we might want to, again, introduce him to some of you that are not familiar. He's been on the program so many times over these many years, author of 6 books. His first 3 books are written under the pen name of Victor Mordecai, so as you go to our website here, you will see that will be the link there as well. But some of your more recent books relate to such things as Islam, a global threat, Christian revival for Israel's survival, Islamic threat, and many other books that we can talk about today. Avi Lipkin, always great to have you here on the program with us, and thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you. And as I said to Catherine just before on the phone, you guys were the very, very first radio show I did in November of 1990 with Marlon Maddox himself. May he rest in peace, great man. And I mentioned your show and Marlon Maddox's name in all 6 of my books, because the most important testimony in my life happened with the Dallas Council on World Affairs. And it actually all started with a fundraiser for KVTT and Marlon Maddox in 1990. So, but you guys, are so close to my heart. It's like first love. It always remains the first love.
Well, when we get you in studio here, I understand you'll be coming to the States in a couple of months. We'll get you in studio, and I think you'll get to see our new studio and be very impressed. We have done a pretty good job of keeping the progress going and making an impact. But we wanted to hear from you, because you are there in Israel, to tell us about these attacks that have come from Hamas. And I guess the first obvious question is, do you feel safe? Because obviously there are a lot of our listeners that may want to join us in a trip that we're going to be taking in October, and others are thinking about going to Israel. What's happening over there in Israel right now?
Well, firstly, as you do know, we have been facing every so often a missile attack. But the missiles really, forgive me for saying it, I mean, you guys are in Texas. It's kind of like 4th of July. I mean, some of these missiles can cause damage, but they're not, the ICBM missiles, between Russia and the U.S. or, things that people are scared of. These are missiles that can take out a house, a small house, let's say. They send shrapnel. Or I don't want to say half, but a large percentage are mortars that are fired, like 2-3 miles, from Gaza into the kibbutzim, the settlements which are just around Gaza. And so we are really, really not affected very much by it. And I'll say another thing which your listeners may or may not know, but the U.S. military marches in lockstep together with the Israeli military. And together, the two militaries have developed the Iron Dome system. And this has been literally a miracle from God.
Yes.
This Iron Dome system has taken out, first you have to understand, when a missile is launched, the Israeli radar picks it up immediately, and we know if it's going to hit out in the open field, in which case we leave it alone, let it hit in the open field. If we know the trajectory is going to lead it to a target which could, cause fatalities, or a militarily sensitive target, then the Iron Dome intercepts and takes it out. And so it's been a miracle from God that nobody has died from a direct hit from these missiles. Some people have been killed, of course, by mortars. Mortars are fired, and a few hundred yards away they land. And, if you're a soldier or you're a farmer or something, there's no time to take measures to get into the shelter. Listen, in warfare, when you have mortars or snipers shooting, people die. But the missile threat itself is not a threat. Your tour is totally secure. There's nothing to worry about. And I'll tell you something else also. My son, Aaron Lipkin of Lipkin Tours, so I have one company named after me.
Yes.
And actually it's after my son, but he's my son, so it's me. We have more and more tourism coming from Christians all over the world, U.S., Canada, France. And not only we have not had cancellations, we have more and more Christians who are saying, hey, we want to be where the action is. And so we have more and more tourism company. We're also working with Tommy Waller, who has the Hayovel Jubilee volunteer group. We have over 1,000 Christian volunteers coming to live in Israel for 3 months, harvesting grapes and tending the vineyards. As it says in Isaiah 61, that strangers, are going to tend the vineyards and harvest the grapes. And now with these volunteers are going into other aspects of agriculture and supporting Israel. And they live in a kibbutz-type community situation. And it's just wonderful. And let me tell you, I don't want to see the hotter things get, the more they come. But I don't have to tell you, Christians who are strong in their faith are not afraid of anything. And, this is the land of Jesus. This is the land that is of the Jew and of the Christian together. And so I would say that the people coming on your tour, and I encourage more people to sign up for your tour. Definitely nothing to be afraid of. We never lose tourists, never. We take care of our tourists, and our tourists also go to places where there is no missiles and no shooting. You want to be shot at, go down to the Gaza border and stand there with the soldiers, then you might get shot at. But,
might get shot at.
Our tourists go to the Sea of Galilee, and they go to Masada and Jerusalem, and it's safe. It's good.
Very good. I might just mention, Avi, that you have spoken in more than 1,000 churches and synagogues all over the United States and Canada and Europe. And I hope that some of our listeners, when you do come back to the United States here, have a chance to hear from you, because you have done quite a bit to rally both Jews and Christians to support the nation of Israel.
Yes, indeed. My second book out of the 6 is called Christian Revival for Israel's Survival. And one of the things I'm saying is that the amount of Muslims pouring into the U.S., Canada, Europe, and South America is so great that the Jews are now outnumbered in many places by 5 to 1 or 10 to 1. And if it isn't for the Christians, we Jews are going to be in a very tough situation in the United States and in the West. And I just got an email now where somebody said, I haven't checked it out, but I knew about it in my heart. But when I got it, I saw it, I said, this is right. ISIS is now in Ferguson, Missouri.
Yes.
In other words, these riots, you have a lot, yeah. So these riots, the police are arresting instigators coming in from Los Angeles and from New York, and they're coming in with helmets and flak jackets. And these people are not coming to protest. They're coming to start a war. If you remember David Wilkerson's prophecy of the cities going up in flames, this is what ISIS wants.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation today with Avi. And if you'd like to join us, we'll open up the phones a little bit earlier, because I know that some of you have said, I don't feel like I can trust the way the mainstream press has been covering this conflict between Israel and Hamas. We're going to come back and talk a little bit about some of the philosophy and the theology of Hamas. But also, perhaps you would like to ask a question, and I did want to give you a chance, since we are making this long-distance phone call all the way over to Israel, for you to benefit from somebody who's on the ground and can really give you a perspective. And if you'd like to know more about him, we have all of that on our website. I would certainly commend to you some of the books that we've been talking about here, and those will be helpful to you. Christian Revival for Israel's Survival: Is Fanatic Islam a Global Threat? Just a couple of issues that you might want to address, and we'll come back and continue our conversation with him and you right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
You know, most of us in modern society feel overscheduled and overcommitted. You've probably heard people say that they are super busy or crazy busy. Perhaps you've even said it yourself. You're busy at work and you're busy at home. That is why Kate Murphy, writing in the New York Times, says we have no time to think. Our busy, fast-paced, frenetic lifestyles give us little or no time for quiet contemplation. And when we do have a moment for reflective thought, many of us hate the quiet. In fact, there is a study that actually shows how much we hate a quiet moment. Now, I first heard about this study by psychology professor Timothy Wilson from a Breakpoint commentary by John Stonestreet. He was quoting from a science journal that reported, quote, "Given the choice, many people would rather give themselves mild electric shocks than sit idly in a room for 15 minutes, unquote. Kate Murphy quotes from the same study. Here's the background. Students were asked to sit alone without mobile devices for 15 minutes. Half found this to be an unpleasant experience. In the next experiment, they were given a small electric shock. Most of them said that they would be willing to pay not to experience the shock again. Yet when they sat in the room alone with their thoughts, 2/3 of the men and 1/4 of the women were so eager to do something, they actually gave themselves shocks. You know, there are all sorts of theories why people keep themselves busy so that they don't have to think or reflect. Perhaps they're trying to avoid thinking negative thoughts. Perhaps we're all addicted to busyness. Whatever the reason, we see that the Bible values quiet and meditation on God's Word. Psalm 46:10 says that we are to be still and know that I am God. The Bible teaches, and the lives of great Christians in the past remind us that we need time for solitude, prayer, and reflection. Our busy 21st century lives are just the opposite of that. It is time to make time to think and be still. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Continue our conversation today with Avi Lipkin, and if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212, hearing sort of an on-the-ground report from what is happening in Israel. And for those of you that are interested in the idea of the Iron Dome, we have posted some articles in the past, and so you can do a search on our website, pointofview.net. One from Human Events, Israel shoots down Hamas drone. Also, Hamas rocket ranges and how the Iron Dome works. So some of those that we've talked about are available. But let's, if we can, Avi, talk about Hamas. And we have certainly watched how that has been, I think, poorly represented sometimes in the mainstream press. You live there. You have spent a lot of time studying the philosophy and theology of Hamas. Tell us more so that we can be educated about what this very significant threat is to Israel.
Okay, well, one of the things I always share in the churches in the U.S., Canada, and Europe, and also I even got a 3-year jail sentence in Switzerland for speaking this way, is that the God of Islam is not the God of the Jews and the Christians. And this is something that is very, very misunderstood in many churches, and if I may add, synagogues. There are many religious leaders in Judaism and Christianity who come out and say Allah and God are the same. And even President George W. Bush said it, and Jimmy Carter said it. I'm sure other presidents said it too, but it's all out of ignorance. Allah is the devil. Allah is Satan. And what I share is that it cannot be that Allah is God if he wants to kill the Jew on Saturday, kill the Christian on Sunday, kill the Hindu, the Buddhist, and the blacks in Africa anytime, and then the Muslims go ahead and kill each other. The Sunnis kill the Sunnis. We see this with Daesh. Daesh, you don't know Daesh. Daesh is ISIS. ISIS is killing Sunnis who are not fanatic enough like they are. And by the way, even in Gaza, they're saying that ISIS is rising to power in Gaza and will overthrow Hamas because Hamas simply isn't crazy enough like they are to behead Americans and behead other people and behead their own people. And of course, the Sunnis kill the Shiites. So basically, Islam is a depopulating system. And if we are in the image of God, well, Allah cannot proclaim that He is greater than God unless everyone is dead. So the Muslims are also going to die. Everyone dies. And they praise death. They idolize death, just as the Jews and the Christians idolize life. We want to live. They want to die. And, Israel today, praise God, took out 3 senior Hamas terrorist leaders there in Gaza. And you would think if they had any brains, they'd say, come on, let's make peace. We're being hit too hard. And they say, no, this convinces us even more to continue on the same path of resistance. And one of the definitions of insanity is when you keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. These people are sacrificing their children on the altar of Molech. But instead of the altar of Molech, it's a dynamite fest, or using these children in Gaza as human shields, firing missiles from schools and from churches and mosques, from hospitals, hoping that the Israelis will retaliate and kill innocent civilians. And Israel has aborted, I'm telling you, with all seriousness, Israel has aborted hundreds of air missions when we saw the children on the rooftops. They put the children on the rooftops.
That's
amazing. So that if we destroy the building, they'll be able to blame Israel.
One of the quotes that's been going around quite often is from your Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and he says there's a difference between Israel and Hamas because he says we're using missile defense to protect our citizens, and they're using their citizens to protect their missiles. And we have said on this program that sometimes we don't have a lot of visual evidence of what is happening because if they're oftentimes in Gaza see a camera pointed at them, they'll shoot back at those. But we've had some that have shown up on YouTube showing deliberately how Hamas does all that it can to try to locate any missile launch site close to a hospital, close to a mosque, close to a family home, so that if indeed Israel tries to take it out, there will be collateral damage, and they will be able to show those pictures that night on the evening news.
Very correct. Again, it has to be emphasized that they are ready to sacrifice the people of Gaza for their holy purposes, which is self-destruction. It's complete insanity. And, I'll tell you something else. We in Israel, I said this on Israeli National TV, Channel 1 in 2006, I said very clearly that the Palestinians are hated by all the Arab nations. There's only one nation on the face of the earth that loves the Palestinians, and that's us Jews. We live with them, we work with them, we eat with them, we drink with them, we share family occasions with them. Our house was built by Palestinians, and we're best friends with them. And, the other group, the PLO in Ramallah, they're calling on the Palestinians to rise up in revolt. And nobody's rising up in revolt because these Palestinians understand, the ones we live with here in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, that the leadership in Gaza is completely insane. And at least the leadership in Ramallah is insane, but they wear a tie and jacket, and they need the money from the West to stay in business. And but the people, the Palestinians who actually live with us and work with us, which is the vast majority, they don't want a third intifada or uprising. They want to live in peace. They want to raise their children. And our relations on a personal one-to-one basis with the Palestinians is excellent.
Wow. Talk about the tunnels for just a minute, because that's something that we have seen quite a bit about. These are more than just a tunnel you crawl through. Some of them are quite sophisticated, but it seems to me, in light of the discoveries, that the goal was to use those tunnels to get into Israel, to place bombs, blow up, and really in maybe this fall, use this for another intifada like you were talking about.
Well, I wanted to say two things about this. Firstly, I'm an American also. I've been in Israel 46 years, but I'm 65 years old. I moved here when I was 19. And I grew up in the Cold War era in New York. I remember that from the documentaries on TV. I remember the Korean War. And, the North Koreans have dug very, very massive tunnels under the border into South Korea. The trucks can go through those tunnels. Now, the North Koreans work with the Iranians. The Iranians work with Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah, we know that they've dug tunnels into Israel from Hezbollah, from Lebanon. In Gaza, we knew about these tunnels. And I'll tell you, I participated in an Army spokesman's course in 1993. And we were already talking about the tunnels that they're digging.
Wow.
And tunnels into Egypt, tunnels into Israel. And I don't know, I can't personally understand how we did not know that there were those tunnels underneath our kibbutzim, underneath our communities. And the second thing I wanted to say is that literally God, as painful as it was that they killed those 3 boys, those 3 teenagers 2 months ago,
yes.
But that was a miracle from God, because what happened was they didn't realize when they kidnapped those 3 boys that we were going to arrest their whole leadership in the Hebron area, in the Judea-Samaria area, which led to this war with Gaza. Had this not happened, had they not kidnapped and killed those 3 teenagers 2 months ago, we might have remained quiet until Rosh Hashanah, a month from now, and then 8 tunnels would have popped up in the middle of our settlements, in the middle of our communities, and this would have been the 9/11 of Israel. They would have killed thousands of Israelis.
Yes. Well, and again, that's all that we are hearing, is that these tunnels were equipped with all sorts of explosives. The goal maybe would even be to pop up and be dressed as Israeli soldiers, as part of the Israeli Defense Force. And as you said, that could have been a 9/11 for Israel if it hadn't been for the decision of your prime minister to go in and say, we can't just have airstrikes, we've got to put boots on the ground. And once they go in, they found tunnels they didn't even know existed.
Right. And I do believe that there are still tunnels as of yet undiscovered.
Wow. Quite a bit. We need to take a break. When we come back, though, let me give a few of you a chance. If you would like to ask a question of Avi Lipkin, we certainly do encourage you to take the time to join our conversation, but also to take the time to learn a little bit more about him. Our first web link actually is his web link, and that will give you an opportunity to know a little bit more about some of the things that he does. It's vicmord.com in case you want to go to it, and that comes from his previous a pseudonym, pen name of Victor Mordecai. You can find any of his books there. Of course, we've made those available here at Point of View as well. But if you would to know more about him, if you would like to read one of his books, if you'd like to schedule him for a speaking engagement at your church or synagogue or other places, perhaps when he comes back to the United States, we certainly do encourage you to do that. We are a little bit later going to be talking about this trip that we are making to Israel. And I think you heard that it's probably a better time to go now that they've eliminated some of the terrorist threats. October 23rd to November 1st, we'll be talking later this hour with Paul Barreca, and we'll talk about that and how that can be a way in which you can be involved in some of these activities. And so please take the time to visit the website today. You're going to find lots of great articles. We have an article about taking out the Hamas chief and what that might mean and what is happening in Gaza, what is happening in Israel. And in the second hour today, we're going to be talking about this new book, Fault Lines, A Layman's Guide to Understanding America's Role in the ever-changing Middle East. And so we'll get into the broader perspective of the Middle East. But if you'd like to join our conversation today, that number is 1-800-351-1212. If you'd like to know a little bit more about some of the issues we're talking about today, we have articles, we have videos, and much more at the website pointofview.net. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll focus a little more time and attention on some of the threats to Israel. Why should the United States support Israel, and what can we as individual Christians do to support the nation of Israel? And if you'd like to join us on that conversation, we certainly do welcome your phone calls. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
I'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Avi Lipkin with us, and let's go to some phone calls. He is in Israel, and that gives you a chance to hear from somebody on the ground giving us a report. We'll go first to Rhode Island, WARP. Nadine, thank you for calling today.
Thank you for taking my call, and I'd like to first say thank you so much for your honest reporting about what's going on, and may I pray a hedge of protection over you as you do this reporting and bring this news to us. My question is, do the Christians and the Jewish people feel that they have a right to defend themselves against ISIS? And we know that ISIS has said that their intentions are to dominate the world and obviously come here to America, and they have threatened Americans. And, you know, a lot of people, and I hate to say it, feel like they are distant from what's actually going on in Israel, but they don't realize that if our toe hurts, our whole body feels it, right? So we're to pray for those that are there and to realize that it's a real crisis. But do we have the right? I mean, are they just laying down their lives in saying God is going to, you know, justify us, and justification is not our own, or can we defend ourselves against this?
What can you say?
And not only can you, must you. You must defend yourselves. And one of the things I've noticed, I've been preaching in churches and doing radio and TV shows for the last 25 years. And every time I see a Gallup poll, I see that 59% of the Americans say that what America is facing with Islam is a war of clash of civilizations between Islam and every other civilization, against Christianity, against Judaism, against all the other systems in the world. You know, my wife Rachel is Jewish. I'm Jewish, but I'm an American, so I think like a Christian. I was raised in America, praise God. I love the Americans, and I'm actually working to form a Judeo-Christian political party here in Israel.
Yes.
I'm running for the Knesset, which is our Congress. My wife is from Egypt. She's from Cairo. She monitors the Arabic language broadcasts of our enemies, you know, for the Israeli government. And they were saying for years before 9/11, that they were going to take American planes and crash them into the World Trade Center, because the World Trade Center and Wall Street were seen as the crown of glory of American capitalism. And they view the American capitalism as Christianity. And the way to destroy America is to destroy the World Trade Center and destroy the American economy, cause a crash on Wall Street, literally. And my wife gave me this information years before, excuse me, and I wrote my first book in 1997 under the name of Victor Mordecai, and I discussed, you know, the planned attacks on the World Trade Center, and many people attacked me and said, oh, you're not politically correct, you're talking bad about good people. I say, yes, the Muslims are good people, but the terrorists are Muslims. Not all Muslims are terrorists. A very small minority are terrorists. But 19 Muslims shut down the United States on 9/11. And now they're promising, ISIS is promising, that their next series of 9/11 attacks are going to make the World Trade Center attack pale in comparison. ISIS is promising to overturn America because they see America as the great Christian Satan to be destroyed. On the other hand, you have another agenda backed by the Saudis, which is called the moderate agenda. Moderate my foot. It's not moderate. But their plan is not to destroy America with 9/11 attacks, but to buy it out using the petrodollars that America pays for its oil. And actually, I see an immigration of tens of millions of Muslims coming to the United States right now already, and the Saudis are going to build houses for them. So, of course, if the Saudis are going to build houses for these Muslims in America, you're going to have a building boom in America. The whole American economy is going to take off. And Wall Street is going to skyrocket past 20,000, but it'll be at the cost of receiving tens of millions of Muslim immigrants. Now, ISIS sees this plan of the Saudis as treason because they're saying, no, you can't fix America, you got to destroy it. So what you have actually is you have evolutionary Muslims, the Saudis, versus the revolutionary Muslims, the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda and Jabhat and Nusra and Hamas. These people say, no, destroy America. So America is faced by two conflicting ideologies within Islam that want to either destroy America or take it over for the glory of Allah. And American Christians need to wake up in the churches and to deal with this, have a revival, and bring Americans back to their senses.
Well, very good. Let's take at least one more phone call here. We'll go to the state of Alaska, KJNP. Lady, thank you for calling. You're on with Avi Lipkin.
Thank you for taking my call. Back on the 4th, when the tunnel stuff was going on, did anybody realize that Israel was going into that date of the 9th of Av? And all the horrible things?
Of course. Listen, there are a lot of theories about 9th of Av. There's also a very, very special pastor by the name of Mark Biltz there in Tacoma. I don't want to say not far from Alaska, but it is near Seattle. And I spoke in his church Monday night. And he wrote a book, and he made a video about the bloody moons, the red eclipses of the moon.
The blood moons.
And it's interesting that this the 9th of Av and the war with Gaza happens smack in the middle of both these red moons. So I'm not an astronomer and I'm not an astrologist, but indeed there are signs in the heavens, and so it could be that there was something going on there, and we have yet to see how this thing ends.
Wow, incredible. Just before I let you go, Avi, and we certainly appreciate you letting us talk to you by long distance, and we'll do it again, and looking forward to getting you in studio where we can chat for 2 hours today, on maybe in the future. But for today, let's, if we can, talk about some of the resources that are available on your website, because that is a link that we have provided. And if people want to read some of these books that we've been talking about today, certainly two that were very prominent is Fanatic Islam, A Global Threat. And of course, the one you mentioned just a minute ago, Christian Revival for Israel's Survival, plus many of the others, Islam Prophesied in Genesis, and your Bible blog and your updates. What can people do as they go to the website to support you and to schedule a possible speaking engagement or to get some of your books? Tell us what's available there.
All of the above. And also, when you come to Israel, you can also be in touch with me, and I'll come and meet your group and talk to them. But there are many, many things Christians need to do. The first thing Christians need to do is to understand that Allah is Satan. Allah is not God. And we have to stop this nonsense in churches and synagogues in the U.S. and in the world to say Chrislam is the way, praying to Allah and God the same. That's like praying to God and the devil at the same time. There's a lot of ignorance. Again, ignorance both in the Jewish and Christian worlds in the West. You have to work very closely with your congressmen and women. You have to work with your civic leaders. You have to work with your law enforcement. You have to work with your civic leaders. And, of course, you have to come to Israel as pilgrims, as tourists, buy Israeli products, invest in Israel through Wall Street or any way you want to invest. I'm not an investment counselor, by the way, so I don't know anything about those things. And, of course, if you want to see a Judeo-Christian political party come to power in Israel, then you need to support my party and support what I'm doing.
Let's, if we can, just for a second, since I have another minute, have you talk about that, because we've talked about it in the past, but I know we have new listeners, and they may not be familiar with the fact that you really want to have a party that would have a greater influence in the Knesset.
Well, indeed. I was raised on the lap of the American Revolution, no taxation without representation. The Christian population has grown from 2% Arab Christian only to 8%. 8% of our population is Christian, which includes Russian Orthodox, Ukrainian Catholic, Ethiopian Christians, Armenians, Messianics. And I believe the day is coming very soon that the Muslims who are coming to the U.S. are going to start a massacre of Jews and Christian spouses. Don't forget, Jews are intermarried with Christians up to the tune of 71% intermarriage, meaning every 100 Jews who get married in America, 71 are going to marry Christian spouses. The Muslims are going to kill the Christian spouses and the children, too. This is a horrible message. It's a scary message. It's in my 6 books. America has to prepare for this invasion of Muslims coming in who have the hatred of the Jew and the Christian in their mother's milk. It's a terrible thing to say. Many Muslims are good people, but the agenda, even if only 10%, according to law enforcement, are terrorists, if you've got 30 million Muslims in America today and 6 million Jews, and 30 million, 10% of that is 3 million, and they will have guns, no matter what kind of gun control is imposed. The terrorists will always have the guns. So it's very important for Jews and Christians to wake up to this new reality and support Israel, but also support the Christianity of America.
Very good. Avi, thank you for joining us today. We'll do it again, and I look forward to an opportunity to have you in studio so we can carry on this conversation at a longer pace. But thank you for joining us today here on Point of View. Well, let's, if we can...
I will be here another 6 weeks, and you call me anytime you feel like.
Glad to do so. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking briefly with Paul Barreca because he has been helpful in putting together this tour that we are doing in the fall. And up until a few days ago, we didn't have any openings. We do now have some that we were able to work out. So we're going to talk about that opportunity. And as you heard from Avi, he encourages you to go to Israel. And if you've never been able to go to the Holy Land, never had a chance to really, in a sense, strengthen your faith on a 10-day inspirational tour of Israel, we have information about that on our website, pointofview.net, 10 Days in Israel, and we'll talk about that. And then we'll, in the second hour, spend some time talking about this new book, Fault Lines, A Layman's Guide to Understanding America's Role in the Ever-Changing Middle East. And we'll try to give you some of the history behind the Middle East as well. So lots coming up. Let's take a break. We'll come back with more right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. I thought we might spend a little bit of time talking about this 10-day inspirational tour of Israel, and it has been put together in large part by my good friend Paul Barreca, who is the senior pastor of Faith Bible Church in Vineland, New Jersey. He is a graduate of Word of Life Bible Institute, the Lancaster Bible College, and Michigan Theological Seminary, and is completing a Doctor of Ministry degree at Baptist Bible Seminary. Paul, I know that you had a chance to hear from Avi Lipkin, and I think Avi is encouraging us to go to Israel, so I'm ready to go.
He is, and that's everything that I've heard as I've been following the news and talking to people on the ground in Israel. Everything that I've heard is very much in agreement with what he had to say, and it's very exciting that in just a couple of months we'll be there.
I haven't talked about it too much because at one point we were pretty much full, but I think because of some circumstances we have a few openings. As best as you can determine, how many openings do we have at the moment?
I think we have 8 or 9 openings at the moment. So even if someone were to have a group of a few friends, we would be able to accommodate that. And so we have the ability. We did have just, I believe, 4 or 5, and due to some circumstances and some of our family and couples, we have a few openings. But always a good time to go to Israel in the fall. The weather is spectacular. And I do want your listeners to know, I didn't catch the beginning of Avi's presentation, but tourism in Israel has continued through the entire recent crisis in Gaza. In other words, tour groups have been going consistently. No one's been turned away. No one's been shot at or, anything. Rockets aren't falling on people's heads. I want to make sure that your listeners know that tourism is perfectly safe, and our group is going to be doing some wonderful sightseeing and the kinds of things that have been going on continuously for the past 6 weeks without interruption.
If you can, just give us a brief overview. I know it's 10 days, but I thought for some people might wonder exactly where are you going. And first of all, we're staying away from any place that might even be possibly dangerous and going to all the places that I think most listeners would want to go to if they wanted to walk in the footsteps of Jesus.
That's right. We'll be seeing 3 predominant areas in the land of Israel. The longest amount of time is going to be spent in Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a wonderful city, and as Avi has said, Palestinians and Jews get along marvelously and splendidly in Jerusalem. It's a city that is shared by both, and we're going to see the major sites that are there in Israel, including Hezekiah's Tunnel and the Temple Mount. Most folks don't know that just recently the Temple Mount Authority allowed Jews to go to the top of the Temple Mount and be there, and that was the first time in several years that that's happened. So those are indications that actually in Jerusalem the situation is very favorable. So we'll be in Jerusalem and seeing the sites there, Gordon's Calvary, the empty tomb that is there, possibly the tomb that Christ may have been laid in. We don't know for sure, but it is in a garden, and it's there. We'll be seeing Gethsemane and walking the path from Gethsemane through the gate. It's not the eastern gate that Jesus would have walked through, but through the Lion's Gate there into the city of Jerusalem, and really just retracing the steps of Jesus in Jerusalem.
Well, and then, of course, we also have a trip to Masada and Golan Heights and a variety of other places. So it's a very easy trip for our listeners. Of course, others, if they want to stay along, there's even a hike that you can do, but that's optional. But for some of our listeners, if they wanted to spend 10 days and really have a chance to have a tour that is not very big, intentionally kept small so that we can interact with everybody, no waiting lines, those kinds of things, I think it's just an ideal opportunity.
It really is. A couple of the things in Galilee, another area that we'll be in, to be on the Sea of Galilee. And then, Kerby, when we're on the Sea of Galilee, you'll be having a Bible study of some of the sites that we'll see. And actually, the very same sea that Jesus and the disciples were on, and when their boat was in jeopardy, and Christ calmed the storm, to be able to read those passages of Scripture in that very location. We'll be in the synagogue at Capernaum, right on the edge of the Sea of Galilee on the northern edge, and that's the synagogue, and it's the very same synagogue. We know that synagogue was there in the time of Jesus, and we'll be in the very same place where Jesus would have preached the dialogue in John chapter 6 on the bread of life. And to be able to read those scriptures and have you share with us, I get goosebumps just thinking about it.
Well, and one more point just before I let you go. I remember that you used to be somewhat of a skeptic about this. I mean, people said, Paul, you really need to go to Jerusalem. You say, look, I've been to seminary, I've studied all this, I'm not so convinced. But everybody kept saying you need to go. And so this is really just your second trip. But after the first one, you sort of turned around pretty quickly, didn't you?
Boy, I really did. I kind of listened to those folks, and you've got to go to Israel, you've got to go to Israel. And I didn't have the money to go, and I didn't think it would add that much to my Christian experience or my understanding of Scriptures because, as you mentioned, I've been through seminary and Bible school and been studying Scriptures and preaching for 30 years. And I tell you, Kerby, and you'll experience the same thing, the perspective of your understanding of the places and the smells and the climate and the sights and just the distance between locations and all of those things, your understanding of Scripture will be forever changed. And I've experienced that, and now I'm on that bandwagon of trying to get folks to enjoy that as well.
Well, I appreciate you actually providing that. Now, as people go to the website, pointofview.net, right-hand corner, 10 Days in Israel. But again, this is being conducted through pilgrim tours, so people can find out how to register and the flights, and there are some opportunities if they want to add miles. Maybe they can even get the price down a little bit. We tried to have something that was dealing with two issues. Number one, cost, which you just talked about, and I think it's one of the lowest cost tours I've ever seen, but still excellent value. Number two, small, so that you feel like you are getting attention. And I know that you and I had a real dedication to making sure that both of those elements are part of that. So I, again, want to encourage any of our listeners, if they would like to be with us October 23rd to November 1st, it is a 10-day inspirational tour of Israel. And Paul, I appreciate you so much for putting that together and helping organize it.
Thank you, Kerby, and I'm really looking forward to being there with you and hearing you teach at some of those sites. It's going to be just a great, great blessing.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll focus again on the Middle East, a layman's guide to understanding America's role in the ever-changing Middle East. And just before we do take a break, many of you probably received an email from me yesterday, and at that particular email, we were talking about some of the issues of immigration. That's one of the I words. We've talked about ISIS. We've talked about Israel. Certainly, immigration is another one. But whether it's our attempt to give you an honest look at the issue of immigration, or as we've talked about today, an honest and forthright look at what is happening in Israel, and in the next hour, what is happening in the Middle East, I hope you value the kind of news and information that we try to give you, the kind of commentary that we do. And so in my piece that I sent out, Seal Our Borders, Protect Our Nation, not only did I encourage you to express your opinion, which we've made that possible for you to do through our action alert, but also to make a gift to Point of View so that you can support what we are trying to do on a fairly regular basis. So if you saw that email, let me encourage you to click on that button. And your gift, especially as we are in the middle of August, would be most appreciated. Obviously, we've come off of a summer where sometimes giving is a little bit more intermittent because individuals are vacationing, they're taking a break from school and activities. So if you can help us, we would greatly appreciate that. If you didn't receive the email, it's very simple. You can also go to our website, pointofview.net, click on that button that says Donate and support the ministry. Or if you would rather just send a check, you can do that as well. Make it out to Point of View, send it to Post Office Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. And as we mentioned just a minute ago with Paul, if you'd like to know a little bit more about this tour, or you know somebody that might want to go on that, we now actually have room for a few more, and we would like to add you to that tour list, and you can find out more, get all the details, the pricing and information on our website, pointofview.net. It's on the right-hand corner there. It says 10 Days in Israel, and we would encourage you to find out more. We'd love to have you join us, and if it is successful, we'll do another one. But we're going to take a break right now and take some time to focus on what has been happening not just in Israel, but in the entire Middle East. We have a number of articles that we have posted, one on another Iraq war to continue and is coming, and also the beheading that was done by ISIS. So some of that material is available on our website as well, pointofview.net. Let's take a break. We'll come back and talk about this new book, Fault Lines, A Layman's Guide to Understanding America's Role in the Ever-Changing Middle East. We'll talk with our author right after this.
Across the nation, this is Point of View. For materials offered during the broadcast, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-3 347 5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
First hour today, we spent some time talking about Israel and had a live report from that. But the second hour here, we're going to spend some time talking about the Middle East. An excellent book that has come out called Fault Lines, A Layman's Guide to Understanding America's Role in the Ever-Changing Middle East. Don Liebich is actually with us, and he is the author of that book, a graduate of the University of Rochester, as well as Harvard Business School's PMD program. He spent a career in the U.S. Navy Nuclear Submarine Service, as well as with Cisco Corporation. He's been involved in economic development and citizen diplomacy and human rights projects in Jordan and Israel and Palestine, including the West Bank and Iran and many other places. And Don, I so appreciate you writing the book, and thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Kerby, a pleasure to be with you.
You know, the theme in the first hour was that we aren't always getting the best information or the most accurate information about Israel from the mainstream media. That theme continues in the second hour as well, because you have said before that as you began to travel in the Middle East, you found real discrepancies between what you observed and what you thought you knew from the kind of media reports and sources that you had. And that led you to write a blog called Memos from the Mountains. But I think you have, in a sense, wanted to write this book because you felt that we weren't really getting the whole story and the most accurate perspective of what's happening in the Middle East.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of selective reporting as to what goes on there. And as you say, when I first started getting involved in the Middle East, I realized that I didn't understand things that I was being told by the people that were there, and I didn't know whether I wasn't paying attention or whether the information that was available to me didn't portray it as it actually was. So I started writing the blog to educate myself, but then it evolved into a couple of books to try to explain my journey to other people. So and that's what brought this book about.
You know, one of the things you say early on in the book is that you run into something I've run into the few times I've traveled overseas. People oftentimes say, well, we love Americans, but we hate your government. We hate your government's policies. In other words, we like Americans. They seem like, reasonably good people, but we don't like what your American government is doing in our country. I think you said that you found the same thing.
Absolutely. Whether it's in Israel, Palestine, or Iran, and they seem to make a differentiation between the American people, who they see as generous and open-minded, and the government policies that they get to experience, because especially in the Middle East, U.S. government policies are literally a matter of life and death for many Middle Easterners.
Well, and one of the things I wanted to maybe do for just a while is maybe go through some of the history. I think about a third of your book really gives us the history, and what happens is nobody ever really gets a historical context. They don't understand how we end up where we are right now. And so I think if we can kind of move through the first couple of chapters, we don't necessarily have to linger on any one of those, but you have the first chapter talking about from Harry Truman to Richard Nixon. Then you begin to move from there to what is happening with the issue of military issues and then independence and the rest. But I think it's important to recognize that First of all, the Middle East has gone through a number of remarkable changes, and it's probably helpful for us to know its history. But before we do so, I guess there's one more thing we need to put on the table, and that is, historically, America has not really cared about what has happened in the Middle East, but there was something that changed, and that's why it's good to pick up with Harry Truman. What I think changed is oil. When it was the Ottoman Empire, when it was run by the Turks, when it was run by Muslim theology and philosophy, except for maybe the interaction with the Barbary pirates, we as a nation didn't pay that much attention to the Middle East. Now we certainly do, and I would have to say that one of the major reasons for that is oil, don't you think?
I absolutely agree. You know, that when I say you can do a brief history of U.S. role in the Middle East, it's one you actually can do a brief history because it's been pretty brief, and that oil led us in a little bit during World War II and after World War I, but it wasn't really till the founding of the State of Israel and then the Suez crisis in the 1950s that the U.S. realized that Britain and France, to a lesser degree, could no longer be counted on to guarantee security and stability of oil, and that the U.S. was going to have to get more involved. And so that's you're right, that 1948 and the years right after that were the beginning of U.S. more direct involvement in the Middle East and not outsourcing to the Brits.
You know, for some of our younger listeners, when we talk about the Soviet Union, they didn't live in that world, but they're listening to the program here as well and recognize that there was a time in which we had a relationship with Egypt, and Egypt was very pro-Russian, and the Russian connection there changed things. Then later on, under some of the other leaders, you have change in the Egyptian ideas. So the first, maybe what you might say, formative years, certainly the 1950s and 60s, were very much influenced, even in the Middle East, by the Cold War, the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, don't you think?
Absolutely, and that's one of the fault lines that I outline in the book, that it was always difficult for the U.S. to balance its Cold War with the Soviet Union, with its desire to have good relations with the Arab countries who were the major suppliers of U.S. oil, who, as you say, were in many cases were in the Soviet sphere of influence. So there was there's been the U.S. had a long history of having difficulty balancing policy objectives that at minimum were conflicting and sometimes mutually exclusive.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about Israel. We did in the first hour, but certainly you have a section in your book here about things like the Six-Day War and the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, and then, of course, Yom Kippur, as well as the emergence of the PLO, which was the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and some of those issues that certainly illustrate that. And then we're going to look at what happened in Iraq and in Iran and the relationships that have changed dramatically. If you have never really understood the history of the Middle East, I think this book does a very good job in a short number of chapters to help you understand how we got to where we are. And then today, let's look ahead, because in our particular sections that we have today under articles, we have articles about another Iraq war is coming. That's by Max Boot, and he's been writing about the fact that we need to have more military involvement, either fight ISIS there, we're going to fight him here. And then also an article that we've posted on the beheading that was done by ISIS and what that means for the future. So we have quite a number of articles we've posted here. We have this book, Fault Lines, and we have a link to Don's website, and we'll talk more about some of the resources there. And a little bit later, of course, we'll open up the phones to give you a chance to join our conversation. So stay tuned. We'll have more right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
You know, most of us in modern society feel overscheduled and overcommitted. You've probably heard people say that they are super busy or crazy busy. Perhaps you've even said it yourself. You're busy at work and you're busy at home. That is why Kate Murphy, writing in the New York Times, says we have no time to think. Our busy, fast-paced, frenetic lifestyles give us little or no time for quiet contemplation. And when we do have a moment for reflective thought, many of us hate the quiet. In fact, there is a study that actually shows how much we hate a quiet moment. Now, I first heard about this study by psychology professor Timothy Wilson from a Breakpoint commentary by John Stonestreet. He was quoting from a science journal that reported, quote, "Given the choice, many people would rather give themselves mild electric shocks than sit idly in a room for 15 minutes, unquote. Kate Murphy quotes from the same study. Here's the background. Students were asked to sit alone without mobile devices for 15 minutes. Half found this to be an unpleasant experience. In the next experiment, they were given a small electric shock. Most of them said that they would be willing to pay not to experience the shock again. Yet when they sat in the room alone with their thoughts, 2/3 of the men and 1/4 of the women were so eager to do something, they actually gave themselves shocks. You know, there are all sorts of theories why people keep themselves busy so that they don't have to think or reflect. Perhaps they're trying to avoid thinking negative thoughts. Perhaps we're all addicted to busyness. Whatever the reason, we see that the Bible values quiet and meditation on God's Word. Psalm 46:10 says that we are to be still and know that I am God. The Bible teaches, and the lives of great Christians in the past remind us that we need time for solitude, prayer, and reflection. Our busy 21st century lives are just the opposite of that. It is time to make time to think and be still. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Liebich with us today as we talk about his book, Fault Lines, A Layman's Guide to Understanding America's Role in the Ever-Changing Middle East. Might also commend to you one of the articles by Max Boot. It starts out by saying Iraq is a bloody mess. The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria has extended its hold from eastern Syria into western and northern Iraq, massacring Shiites, Christians, and Yazidis wherever it can. Meanwhile, in Baghdad, there has been a constitutional crisis with the prime minister threatening to cling to power even though his own political bloc has chosen a different candidate. What a mess. And that's why we're talking about that today. And if you'd like to join us, especially since some are talking about getting more involved militarily, we'd love to hear from you. 1-800-351-1212. Don, let me come to you for just a minute, though, to talk about Israel. In one of the chapters, you spend a little bit of time helping us understand what happened in Israel, the establishment of the nation of Israel, the UN declaration, and the attempt to try to have a two-nation settlement, then the Arab-Israeli War, the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, and then, of course, the establishment of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, now known as the Palestinian Authority. What do we need to know about Israel and the Palestinians that certainly we sometimes are not necessarily privy to and aren't really being educated about by our mainstream media?
Well, I think we have, we being the United States, has always supported two states, one for the Palestinians and one for the Jews, and it's been something that started with the UN. If you look at the map that the UN drew, you had to be a real optimist to think that that would survive, and it didn't. And
I need to put that map up there. The UN partition looks like a mess. It looks like one of those gerrymandered congressional districts. And to think that Israel and the Palestinians could have even survived that. Of course, the plan wasn't for the Palestinians to do so. The plan for that was for them to just drive the Jews into the sea and make it all Arab. But nevertheless, it was a disaster at the beginning. But then right after that, as you point out, there was a war that allowed Israel to have some contiguous land that they could begin to defend.
That's right. And they immediately changed the UN borders, and those survived till 1967, pretty much, and then the '67 war. They took over all of historical Palestine, and that's essentially where we've been since then. And although the U.S. and most pundits cling to the view that two states are still possible, we've been trying since the early 1990s to make that come into fruition, and without much success. And it's hard to see how you could unscramble the egg at this point. At least for me.
Very difficult, obviously, to establish a two-state solution when one of the states wants to destroy the other one. It's kind of hard to bring peace. But while we're on Israel, we'll jump into the next chapter, because you spend some time, obviously, talking about Jimmy Carter, the President Jimmy Carter, and inviting Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin to Camp David, which came to be known as the Camp David Accords. And so where you had before Egypt being hostile to Israel, you now have Anwar Sadat actually signing what essentially is almost like a peace treaty that allows, up until today, the opportunity for Israel to be a little less concerned about its border with Egypt because of the peaceful negotiations that took place under Jimmy Carter's reign. And yet, as you also point out, the ink was not even dry on the Camp David Accords when President Carter was thrown into turmoil because you had the Iranian revolution taking place. So let's, if we can, kind of complete the circle on some of that.
Yeah, well, the Iran under the Shah was a strong ally of the U.S. and of Israel, and but in 1979, the Iranian Revolution changed all that, and the things that Iranians remember most about the U.S., there are really three things that frame the way they look at the U.S. One is the 1953 coup, which the U.S. helped organize to overthrow Mohammad Mossadegh. The second is our support for Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq War and the shooting down of 655, Iranian Air Flight 655 by a U.S. Navy ship. And so that's the way they look at us. We look at them from the hostage crisis, which happened right at the time of the Iranian Revolution, and has changed our relationship with Iran from one of being an ally to one of being a long-term adversary, and we've been in a low-level war with them for 30 years.
Certainly, going all the way back to Ayatollah Khomeini in the 1970s, all the way up to today. And one of the other elements in between Israel and Iran is Iraq. And that, again, brings us up to Operation Desert Storm, because, again, we see that we've had actually two different Iraq wars. Now, the Wall Street Journal referring to a third Iraq war, or the article that I've posted here today by Max Boot, Another Iraq War is Coming. More and more people saying that it's going to come in threes, and if indeed that's the case, we might see boots on the ground. Right now, we already see bombing missions and everything else going to Iraq, and that's another, if you will, fault line there in the Middle East, is it not?
It is. The winner out of the 2003 Iraq War was Iran. It strengthened their power in the Middle East, overthrowing their biggest adversary in Saddam Hussein. I guess I would tend to disagree with Max that I don't see the U.S. going back in with boots on the ground to confront ISIS. I think we're going to try and work through regional players. Right now it's the Kurds and the Iraqi army. If that doesn't work, I think we may need to work more closely with Iran and Turkey, because I don't think that there's any stomach for boots on the ground politically.
I don't think so
or
either.
Financially in this country.
And he's talking about really more kind of advisors. But along the way, we're going to take some phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. So let's take a phone call here. We'll go to Raymond in California, listening on KYCC. What would you like to share with us today?
Thanks for taking my call, Kerby. I'm a Vietnam-era veteran, a disabled veteran, and this whole ISIS thing kind of has me in a bit of a pinch, because I really believe that we can't look at ISIS as a problem in and of itself. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. You know, the history of that region and our involvement militarily and even politically in that region goes, forever. But it scares me to think that we might put boots on the ground there, and I'm so glad to hear that. The general idea is try to handle this regionally and with local people, because if we try to put boots on the ground, it's just gonna lead to another thing. We can't sum it up and solve the problem by dealing just with ISIS.
Let me come to you, because, again, this book really helps us understand that we've got a lot of fault lines running through the Middle East, which is why you titled the book that way. And sometimes when we back one group or we fight against one group a few years later, sometimes merely sometimes just a decade later, we find out that our former enemy is now one of our allies. And so I think we've got to be a lot more careful about how we get involved in the Middle East. Don, your thoughts?
Yeah, and one of the fault lines that I talk about in the book is our failure to take into account the unintended consequences,
right?
The kinds of things that you just talked about, Kerby, whether it's arming the Al-Qaeda Mujahideen in Afghanistan and having those chickens come home to roost, although we were trying to be very careful about arming the rebels in Syria, the alliances in the Middle East shift quickly, and one tribal group that we arm because they're so-called good guys can be part of ISIS the next month, and so I think we've seen a lot of unintended consequences of our actions in Syria spill over into what we're now faced with the Islamic State.
Perfect setup. Chapter 4, Unintended Consequences. We have a mandatory break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about some of the lessons, the really hard lessons we've learned from the Middle East with some of those unintended consequences. And if you would like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212, a discussion about the Middle East, and we're talking about the book Fault Lines, A Layman's Guide to Understanding America's Role in the Ever-Changing Middle East. And Don Liebich is with us, and we will continue our conversation with him and take some more phone calls right after this.
You are listening to Point of View. For materials offered during the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221. Or call our toll-free number, 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Give you an opportunity to join the conversation as we talk with Donald Liebich, and we are talking about his book, Fault Lines, a book that I certainly do commend to you. About 170 pages, and it is a layman's guide to understanding America's role in the ever-changing Middle East. I've got a number of phone calls, so let's work through one or two of those, and we'll get back to some of the content in the book. We'll go, first of all, to Alan in Texas. Thank you for calling today.
Yeah, I just want to thank y'all for letting me talk. A few months back, everybody was talking about how the United States is perceived as being weak. To me, ISIS has opened up the door to show that we're not weak. They're a people that don't value any kind of life. I mean, they're cutting people's heads off, killing people,
yes,
just for believing in Christ. And I believe that our military, if our president and governments will get out of the way, can go in there because they don't have people to hide behind. They're there in another country butchering people. We can go over there because we are a mighty country, a God-fearing country, I pray. And that we can go over there and just wipe these people out. And I don't see any reason why we can't other than our government is holding us back.
Yeah, the president yesterday made some very, very powerful comments. The question that is now being asked by many is, okay, what are the actions that will follow up with that? And so I think your point's well taken. And this is, if nothing else, kind of a Holocaust that's taking place in Iraq right now. Don, what are your thoughts about what can or should be done in terms of already there are bombing missions and there's an attempt to reinvigorate the Iraqi army? They've been able to take back the dam in Mosul and some other places, so it seems as if we can, with maybe some aid and help to some of those groups, whether it's out of Baghdad or whether it's from the Kurdish north, to push back ISIS. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, Kerby. I think that I also agree with the caller that these are nasty guys, and if we don't do something, we're going to be faced with some sort of a genocide or ethnic cleansing of Christians and Yazidis and anyone that doesn't agree with them. I think one important thing to remember about ISIS is that they're a relatively small group. The core group of fighters is somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 fighters, and so it's certainly possible, and I think that's the best way to do it, is to have the local, the people on the ground there who understand the culture, who understand that we don't want to turn this into a sectarian conflict between Christians and Muslims, because that will spread across the Middle East. So I think the president is on the right track to try and give air support. We're the only ones really equipped to do that, and hopefully we can help train, and the other regional powers can help train and support the troops on the ground from the Kurdish section or from the Iranian or the Iraqi government.
Let's take another phone call. We'll go to Georgia. Tony, thank you for calling today.
Well, I appreciate you taking my call once again, Kerby. But, I tend to somewhat, I understand what your guest is saying, but it's just that I tend to wonder about my president as an African-American, because I tend to try to watch a gamut of all that he do from even within the country. And tend to wonder, it's almost like, it's always levels of uncertainty with him and with what he'll do. And we're constantly trying to, play catch up with where he's at. And then he's so unpredictable. And it's like, to me, I think that's just a danger even for us as a nation. I mean, we're fighting him within the nation, and we shouldn't have to be doing it. I mean, in my lifetime, I'm 56 years old, and from the time of Reagan and all, where I supported Ronald Reagan, because I'll admit I'm a conservative, and it's just that to see some of the things that he's totally mismanaged, how can we even trust him? And then the fact that ISIS, with the few number that you guess was just mentioned about the numbers that there are now, what about when there was much fewer than they are now, and they didn't do much of anything about them, and they could have wiped them out by then?
Yeah, well, again, there's always the coulda, woulda, shoulda kind of situation. You had that with Bill Clinton, with Osama bin Laden. You have it certainly with ISIS. Donald, I think it requires us to pay attention, and I'm trying not to make this sound terribly negative, but this is a president that doesn't seem to pay attention to foreign policy. When you talk about presidents that were really engaged in foreign policy, Richard Nixon fits into that category. I think Ronald Reagan fit into that category. Just not so convinced that Barack Obama is all that interested in foreign policy, or even maybe that focused. And if you want to be successful, you need to reduce the number of uncertainties. You need to make it clear both to your allies and to your enemies what your plan is. And even the friends of the president right now say, I'm not sure I could come up with what the Obama doctrine is in terms of foreign policy.
Any American president has to have a doctrine and to be remembered in his legacy, and I would agree. I'm not sure that Obama has a doctrine, but I also am not sure that having a doctrine is necessarily a good thing, because you get your hands tied in an area where the sand shifts quickly, and what looks like a good thing to be doing today may not be as good tomorrow. And I think it's wise to keep your powder dry and don't make quick, rash decisions. If you read my blog, you'll see I'm certainly very critical of a lot of what the Obama administration has done, but I'm not sure it's necessarily good to take an ideological approach to solving the problem.
True. Your chapter, which we talked about just a minute ago, Unintended Consequences, you gave one or two examples, but can you give some others? Because it seems to me that here's a good example where we maybe are guided by maybe old Cold War alliances. We are guided by we need to back, as you said, the Mujahideen, and then end up going back into Afghanistan, and they are then our enemies. There are some times in which our policies, though maybe well-intended, actually backfired on us, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. I think we were talking about Iraq and Syria. That's one example where we have tried to use the Syrian civil war to our geopolitical advantage with Iran and Hezbollah. If we felt as if Assad got overthrown in Syria, that it would weaken both Hezbollah and thereby remove a threat to Israel, and it would also weaken Iran and give us more leverage in the nuclear negotiations. The problem is that we created these space for radical Islamic groups in Syria, and now it's coming back to bite us. So the combination of not understanding, and I understand that unintended consequences are difficult to predict, but some of them are pretty predictable, and I think this was one that was very predictable.
Let's, when we come back from the break, talk a little bit about Gaza, because you have a section here on some of the other actors in Hamas, and of course you had the Egyptian President Morsi back then, and you have Benjamin Netanyahu now. You have the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas and others. So we have all sorts of players there. And since in the first hour we spent a little bit of time talking with Avi Lipkin about the conflict between Gaza and Israel, love to get some of your thoughts on that issue as well, since you've written about that. And of course, we talked about that in the first hour with Avi Lipkin. So if you'd like to join our conversation, we'll get to another phone call here in just a minute. So we'll give you that opportunity to express your opinion. And if you find yourself saying, well, I'd like to know a little bit more, we've posted a number of articles on Israel, articles on the Middle East. We have a link to Donald Liebich's
website, and I would encourage you to go there. You can read the blog. You can find out more about his book. And, of course, we have the book available on our website as well. So any way that you can be educated about these issues, we certainly do want to be a part of that and encourage you to visit our website, pointofview.net, so that you can find some of these links. The book, if you've just joined us, is entitled Fault Lines, The Layman's Guide to Understanding America's Role in the Ever-Changing Middle East, about 170 pages, some great history and an ability to help us understand what has been taking place in the Middle East and our strategic involvement, as well as some of the unintended consequences, are all part of some of the chapters in the book. Let's take a break. We'll continue our conversation right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
If you'd like to join our conversation today, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go back to the phones, and I'll get to our caller in just a minute. Just before we do so, Don, let's, if we can, maybe talk about Hamas and Gaza. That is an intractable situation, but there are a lot of players, and I mentioned the names of some of those. You had, of course, two different Egyptian leaders that have come and gone. You have Iran. You have, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the Prime Minister of Israel. You have also the Palestinian Authority and the President Mahmoud Abbas. and much, much more. So this is another one of those conflicts that we're going to have to manage, and yet I don't see any easy way out of the conflict that is taking place right now. Israel has a right to defend itself. It has a right to go in there and to destroy those tunnels, which could have led to almost an Israeli 9/11 this fall. So what kind of thinking can we do in terms of Israel? Should we support the nation of Israel? What can we do in terms of supporting them with military arms, or should we just simply back out of that situation and leave it to the Israelis to fight their own battle?
Well, my view is that that conflict would be better off without us. We're supporting both sides of that conflict. We give enormous aid to Israel. We give maybe not as much, but a very large portion of aid to the Palestinian Authority to keep them afloat. And if without our aid to both sides of the conflict, I think it would be more likely that the parties would both be forced to make the tough compromises that are going to be necessary to resolve it. Absent that, we're going to have every couple of years these spasms of violence. And I talked to some of my friends on the West Bank this week, and they are extremely concerned. They described it as a tinderbox on the West Bank that's just waiting for a spark to spread this conflict to the West Bank. So it's a very worrisome time, and we'd probably be better off without us.
Let's take some more phone calls. We'll go to North Carolina, WLPG. Ray, thank you for calling today.
Yes, how you doing?
Yes, what would you like to share with us?
Well, it's about the president's foreign policy. I think everybody's got it wrong. His foreign policy is what foreign country am I going to take a vacation in next? I mean, that's about all he does, looks like to me.
Well, this president has been on vacation a little bit. I don't begrudge any president from having a time playing golf. Dwight Eisenhower has been seen as a pretty good president and spent a lot of time out in the golf links. But when the world is kind of in collapse, we sort of expect the commander-in-chief and the leader of the largest and most powerful country in the world to do a little bit more than just an occasional press conference. So I guess your point is well taken. And Don, again, I'll come back to you. I know you've been critical of the president, but there is a sense in which president is the only person that can lead. And if we're talking about going against ISIS, if we are talking about projecting force around the world, that's why since the very beginning we've identified the president as the commander-in-chief. And it seems to me that those individuals, whether they ask for it or not, find themselves in some difficult situations. Jimmy Carter never expected Americans to be held hostage. George W. Bush didn't expect the conflict to arrive on our shores and the destruction of the World Trade Towers and also a plane flying into the Pentagon. But you find yourself in those situations. The President of the United States is really the only person that can lead us if we're going to be engaged in some kind of military action.
And I agree with you, Kerby. I wrote a piece back after Obama's most recent speech at West Point, and it would seem to me to be more like a State of the Union address with a little bit of something for everybody. And from my business experience, I see the role of a leader to be to one, tell us what he wants to do. Number two, tell us why he wants to do it. And number three, tell us what he's going to do to accomplish his objective. And I think the callers are right to be critical of President Obama for not providing that kind of leadership. He needs to do what he did when his first campaign, when he made a race speech. He treated American voters like adults, and we're perfectly capable of understanding the tough decisions, I think.
Sure. Just before I let you go, I want to talk a little bit about what people can find on your website. And again, it's easy to find because we've provided a link. And I know that you are available to speak at various events. Of course, your book is there, the blog Memo from the Mountains, Foreign Policy Perspective. So if people say, I'd like to know a little bit more, I'd like to read a little bit more, I'd like to schedule you for a speaking engagement, or I'd like to get some of the resources that are on your website, talk about what is available to all of our listeners today.
Yeah, it's all there, and I encourage people who disagree with me when I write my blogs to comment, and we've had some good conversations in the comment section with people all over the world, and I think that's useful. And I also have there a list of the media vehicles that I read regularly from all around the world and the Middle East to get a different perspective about events going on there and other parts where U.S. foreign policy comes into play.
Very good. Don, thank you for joining us. Thank you for writing your book, Fault Lines, a very good layman's guide to help people understand the history and the current situation in the Middle East. So thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Kerby, thank you for having me.
Let's take a break, and then when we come back tomorrow, we will have our weekend edition. Penna Dexter will be with us, and Debbie Georgiadis will be with us, and we'll be looking at a number of these issues that have unfolded before us. We spent a fair amount of time talking about the Middle East, so we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. We'll get back to many other topics that are on the agenda. Ferguson, Missouri, certainly one of those, but we'll get into a variety of different issues on our Friday weekend edition. If you were with us in the first hour, you might remember that we spent some time talking about this 10-day inspirational tour of Israel. If you are just joining us, we had Paul Barreca on as we finished up our interview with Avi Lipkin, just to mention that we are doing a tour. And I haven't talked much about it because we're pretty much full, and now we've, I think he said anywhere from 5 to 8 spots are now available. So if you've said, wow, I'd love to go to Israel, it's relatively inexpensive. Matter of fact, one of the most inexpensive tours I think we've ever been able to make available to you, and yet it's a fairly small one too. So this is something where I think you would, if you've always think, I'd love to go, maybe I can't afford it, or maybe I don't want to just be on one of 6 buses going all over Israel, this may be the tour for you. It takes place from October 23rd to November 1st, and since we do have a few open spots, I wanted to announce that again. And if you go to our website, pointofview.net, you will see on the right-hand corner there, 10 Days in Israel with Kerby Anderson, and you can find out all the information. It's put together by our friends at Pilgrim Tours, and if you have always wanted to walk in the Holy Land, walk the same steps of Jesus, this is just a great opportunity. And so, again, take the time to visit the website, pointofview.net. As you go there, I hope that you'll also consider what you might do to support us. I sent out an email yesterday encouraging you to support us during this particular point in time. As you come to the end of the summer, we're doing okay, but we certainly have felt the effects, as you might imagine, of people not giving on a regular basis because of vacations, because of changes in schedule and things of that nature. So if you've been thinking about supporting this ministry, let me encourage you to actually consider doing that right away. And if you've never supported this ministry, even a one-time gift would be a way of saying, I appreciate what you're doing. You're certainly trying to educate us about so many very important issues, and we certainly have spent some time today talking about Israel and the Middle East. We're going to look at all sorts of topics tomorrow here on Point of View. I want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Chris for their help behind the scenes. We'll see you back here tomorrow for our weekend edition.
You have been listening to Point of View. For materials offered on the program, please write to Point of View, Post Office Box 30. That's Box 30. Dallas, Texas 75221, zip 75221, or call our toll-free number 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries and is supported by your generous tax-deductible contributions.